Now this makes me very philosophical. I'm going to delay the denouement a little bit. But this makes me very philosophical because the best evidence we have suggests we live on a planet that was a molten rock surrounded by poisonous gases. And this planet was completely transformed by biological life into a wonderful garden. So essentially, over evolutionary time, photosynthesis, a biochemical photoreactive process which we will not do better mechanically, created the atmosphere which we breathe. It created the pedosphere by altering the geologic materials through the decay of organic materials. And it created the natural hydrological cycle through infiltrating, respirating, naturally regulating the waters and the weather and the temperature and the climate. And we ended up with a beautiful climaxed equilibrium, astonishing place, the only planet that we know that has these types of characteristics. And it has a canopy, and below this canopy is a microclimate. And this microclimate regulates the temperature and humidity, and it was within this canopy that human beings emerged. And we weren't the dominant species to begin with, but we learned, we were sentient. We have a difference between other species, and we became the dominant species. First, our impacts, I think, were from hunting. We probably learned from other animals how to hunt in packs. And we started to drive large mammals to extinction. But our impact really got big about 10,000 years ago in the beginning of the Holocene, when the conditions on the Earth became ripe for agriculture. And we began slash and burn agriculture. This is in Ethiopia. It's a few years ago, 3 years ago, but it could be today. It is happening today. There's no difference between this and Neolithic agriculture. It's the same. And the impact is the same because it reduces biodiversity, reduces biomass, and reduces the accumulation of organic matter. And it leads ultimately to the end of civilization. And all of the impacts that we see, not simply climate change, hydrological dysfunction, desertification, poverty, disparity, all of them. Every civilization, what I found after expanding my inquiry was that most of the cradles of civilization all went the same way. The story of the Loess Plateau is not simply the story of one place, it's the story of humanity. And every civilization that follows this method or this direction will end up in the same way. So we are not the first to reach this point. What's interesting is these other civilizations failed. And I guess on odds, we're probably going to fail unless we do something very different. So if we continue on the same path, we get the same outcome. I have to thank these organizations over the last 15 years for supporting me. And then I'm going to show you this film, a small clip from this film for the denouement. One thing that became apparent early on is the connection between damaged environments and human poverty. In many parts of the world, there's been a vicious cycle. Continuous use of the land has led to subsistence agriculture. And generation by generation, this has further degraded the soils. The vital question we have to ask is, Can this destructive process be reversed? When I first filmed Mr. Ta Fuyuan and his colleagues back in 1995, I had no idea this initiative could achieve such dramatic results. The effort that people put into converting their slopes into terraces has resulted in a marked increase in agricultural productivity. The higher yields are directly related to the return of natural vegetation in the surrounding ecological land. As a result of its success, the lessons learned from the Loess Plateau rehabilitation are now being applied all over China. But could such projects work elsewhere in less centrally controlled societies, with fewer resources and different soils? Ethiopia, perhaps more than any other country, has come to symbolize the vulnerability of humankind to environmental catastrophe. This is a country whose problems have been increased by war and civil conflict. And now, human-induced climate change is predicted to make matters worse. As on the Loess Plateau, centuries of subsistence farming practices have stripped the land of natural vegetation. The dry gullies bear the scars of flash floods. These gullies are evidence of the enormous power of runoff during the rainy season. Without vegetation cover on the hillsides, when the rains come, the water doesn't soak into the ground but flows away in a flood. Then it's not available for agriculture during the rest of the year. This leads to drought and, famously for Ethiopia, famine. But just as I've witnessed in China, there is hope that the situation here can be reversed.
Yeah, that root could survive? No.
In just 6 years, Professor Loess Nagash and local villagers have transformed a severely eroded terrain by planting indigenous trees and plants. Almost miraculously, a clear flowing stream has emerged where once there was a muddy trickle.
How is it that it's possible for you to get the stream to flow throughout the year?
It is because of the vegetation cover, which has been regenerating on this mountain. This water is maintained in the landscape because as soon as rain falls on the canopy on this vegetation, that rain then infiltrated gradually into the ground, ending up with this steady flow of this river.
If we were to restore the vast areas of the planet where we humans have degraded the soils, just think what an impact we would have in taking carbon out of the atmosphere. As much as 1/4 of the world's land mass has been degraded, and much could be rehabilitated in the way we have seen on the Loess Plateau. And we've only just begun to recognize the real value of natural capital. Surely investing in the recovery of damaged environments is a cost-effective way of solving many of the problems we face today. What we've seen in China, in Africa, and around the world is that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. If we can transfer the capital, the technology, and empower the local people to restore their own environment, it'll have enormous benefits. Restoration can sequester carbon, reduce biodiversity loss, mitigate against flooding, drought, and famine. It can ensure food security for people who are now chronically hungry. Why don't we do this on a global scale?
Well, I think that's a good question. And I've noticed in doing this that the fate of the wealthy and the fate of the poor is exactly the same. The future for everyone will be determined by whether we understand the value of functional ecosystems. So if we understand, we can keep talking about the negative, or we can embrace the fact that there's something that we can all do and do it. Make the decision. We're working in Rwanda. Rwanda has made a decision to restore their entire country. This can happen if we take the Sahel from the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic and we begin to do restoration. We'll be able to, oh, yes, well, put up www.eempc.org and go look at the Environmental Education Media Project for China and look at what we've been doing too. So this has to be done on a planetary scale. We need a species response. We have an understanding. The science is understandable. There are things which we can do. They are not necessarily the most expensive. There's another thing that I would say, we can tax or we can do these kinds of things, but actually I think we have fundamental problems. And we need to look at what that fundamental problem is. So I think the fundamental problem is that we're placing productivity above, in value, above functionality. And this is a discernible flaw in the global economic system. So if we value the production and consumption of goods more than we value the ecosystems from which we extract the materials to make those goods, then we're making an obvious mistake. Now, if you don't correct that mistake, then it will continue. You'll have the same outcome. There are not two different outcomes from this particular trajectory. The human activity without ecological understanding leads to ecosystem collapse. So this is not a perception issue. It's not my opinion that biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter are the natural ways that the atmosphere, the hydrological cycle, and fertility were created and are self-regulated by biological systems on the earth. It's a fact. So if we don't understand that and we reduce biodiversity, reduce biomass, and reduce organic matter to the point where we destroy these systems. And what's interesting, I've now been in 70 countries around the world looking at this. And it doesn't matter if you have a fragile system or a really robust system. It only matters if you're going toward decline. So what our task is for all those people who are alive today, our task is to take this line and turn it this way. If we take this line and we turn it this way, out there is sustainability. Out there are functional ecosystems. Now, in many parts of the world, we're going in the wrong direction. Most parts of the world, we're going in the wrong direction. So I think that's fine for me. I hope it's been edifying for you. Thank you very much.